A fox can hear a mouse's heartbeat move under 2 feet of snow, and its whole species has spent longer learning to disappear from you than modern humans have existed. It should never willingly walk toward a person. And yet, every so often, one limps straight out of the tree line toward a farmhouse gate instead of away from it. An animal built to avoid us, moving toward us. Why? Or is it not a choice at all? Just what's left once every other option is already gone. Let's start with what scientists actually call this, because it has a name, and the name matters. It's called referential communication, a fancy way of describing something you've probably watched a toddler do before they could talk. Point at a cup they can't reach. Look at the cup. Look at you. Look at the cup again. That back and forth look is called gaze alternation, and for decades, researchers assumed only a mind wired for language could produce it on purpose. For a long time, in fact, only one narrow category of animal was ever caught doing it at all. The working theory was even narrower than that. Only domesticated animals were supposed to be capable of it. Species bred over thousands of generations to read us the way a dog reads a hand gesture a wolf would never register. The logic held up on paper. Domestication rewires a brain toward humans. Wild animals never got that rewiring. So a wild animal treating a person as a solution instead of a threat shouldn't be possible at all. Somewhere in a field guide, the whole relationship gets summarized in one bloodless sentence. Humans are the least predictable animal in the ecosystem. The rest of nature agreed on that a long time before any field guide existed. We call ourselves the dominant species. But have you ever wondered what we actually are, in their eyes? Picture the shape of you for a second. From the other side. Upright, moving on 2 legs, carrying scents that don't exist anywhere else in nature. Smoke, metal, soap. You don't stalk like a predator, and you don't bolt like prey, so you don't fit either of the 2 categories a wild brain is built to sort every living thing into. Generation after generation, the individuals who couldn't read what you were tended not to survive long enough to pass that confusion on. We were never the fastest thing in any forest. We were never the strongest either. We were just the thing that refused to resolve into something a wild brain could safely file away and stop worrying about. That confusion is supposed to be permanent. It's supposed to be the whole point. So explain what happens when, every so often, that rule breaks. In 2000, a team at Eötvös University in Hungary ran the experiment that first put a name to this. They let dogs watch an owner hide a toy or a piece of food just out of reach, then filmed what happened next. Every dog did some version of the same routine. Trot to the hiding spot. Look at it. Look back at the owner. Repeat. They weren't just excited. They were pointing with their whole body at a problem they couldn't solve alone. Fine. A dog doing this surprises no one. 10,000 years in our houses will do that to a species. So the same lab tried something crueler to the theory a few years later. In 2003, they hand-raised wolf pups from birth, bottle-fed, living alongside people as closely as any dog ever has, then ran the identical test. The wolves failed it. They pulled and bit and threw themselves at the puzzle for as long as it took, and never once looked back at the human standing right there. It's not that growing up close to humans teaches an animal to treat us as the answer. Something else has to be switched on first, and wolves, even hand-raised from birth, apparently don't have the switch. Which is what makes 2020 the year this theory actually broke. Researchers from the University of Roehampton and the University of Sydney ran the same setup on an animal that has never lived in a human house at any point in its evolutionary history. Kangaroos. Wild-born, never bred for a relationship with us. No reason on paper to treat a person as anything but a large, upright shape standing too close. 10 out of 11 kangaroos looked straight at the human the moment the food became unreachable. 9 of those 10 did the full gaze alternation. Box to person, person to box, over and over. Not confusion, a calculation. A genuinely confused animal doesn't calmly clock the one creature in the room who might help, then keep checking back with it like it's waiting on an answer. That's a kangaroo weighing its options in real time, and landing, however briefly, on you as the best one available. And if a kangaroo can do it over a box of sweet potato, it stops being strange that the ocean has its own version of this story. Except out there, nobody was running an experiment at all. On a night dive off Kona, Hawaii, in January of 2013, a diver named Keller Laros heard something he'd never heard underwater before. A loud, sharp squeak, right behind him. He turned to find a wild bottlenose dolphin 3 feet from his mask, alone, when the rest of its pod should have been nowhere near a night dive. Laros had logged over 10,000 dives. He knew a lone dolphin at night usually meant something was wrong. He gestured, "Come here," more out of instinct than expectation. The dolphin swam straight into his hands and rolled onto its side, exposing a fishing hook buried in its fin, line wound tight around the base. For 8 minutes it held still, while a stranger worked a knife inches from its skin, repositioning itself twice to give him a cleaner angle, before finally, hook free, it disappeared back into the dark. Nobody trained that dolphin. Nobody had ever freed it before. It simply decided, alone, at night, that the strange air-breathing thing on the surface was worth swimming toward, instead of away from. Here's the obvious objection, and it deserves a real answer, not a dodge. Maybe none of this is insight. Maybe any animal raised close enough to humans for long enough starts doing this automatically, proximity wearing the costume of intention. It's a fair point. Upbringing clearly matters for something. Except in 2023, researchers at Eötvös-Loránd University tested that exact question directly, running dogs and pigs through the identical out-of-reach setup, both raised from birth in human households, both equally socialized, both equally motivated by the same food reward, both species oriented toward the human, which on its own would have proven the skeptic right. But only the dogs ramped that up the moment the reward became visible too, checking the person, checking the food, back and forth, exactly like the toddler with the cup. The pigs, just as intelligent by most standard measures, just as domesticated, just as close to people their entire lives, never made that specific connection between the person and the problem. Same upbringing, roughly the same intelligence, only one of them put the two pieces together. So, something is clearly happening here. The harder question is what it's like to be the animal it's happening to. We can film the gaze alternation. We can time it, count it, replicate it in labs on 3 different continents. What we cannot do is climb inside that moment and find out whether a kangaroo experiences anything resembling a thought, you, specifically, as the answer, or whether it's closer to a very old, very useful reflex that never needed a thought behind it in the first place. There's an old philosopher's puzzle that fits here almost too well. The idea that you could map every neuron firing in that dolphin's brain, in real time, down to the last synapse, and still not know what the decision felt like from the inside, if it felt like anything at all. Behavior, we can measure completely. The experience underneath it stays exactly as locked to us as it's always been. And that gap matters more once you notice what almost every case so far has in common. The kangaroo was asking for itself. The dolphin was asking for itself. But the strangest version of this on record isn't about an animal saving itself at all. In May of 2026, on a residential street in New York, a man named Sparrow heard a duck outside, making a sound he later described as frantic, a quacking that would not stop, that didn't let up even after he'd noticed her. He followed her to a storm drain, where he could hear ducklings crying under the grate. He called for help. The first agency he reached told him there was nothing they could do. He stayed anyway. A retired police officer from next door showed up with a crowbar, then another neighbor, then her daughter, with a pool skimmer. Firefighters eventually had to break part of the curb just to reach the second drain. For 2 hours, on an ordinary street, in front of strangers with tools she had no way of understanding, a mother duck stood at the edge of that drain and did not leave, did not fly off, did not abandon the one duckling still beside her to go find safety of her own. She'd already made her decision. She was going to keep every human on that street there, until all 11 of her children came back up. She didn't fall into that drain. She was never the one in danger. That's not devotion exactly. That's a bet, placed on the one species she had every evolutionary reason to distrust, for the sake of someone who wasn't even her. Maybe that's the real answer sitting underneath all of this. Not that animals understand what we are, just that, sometimes, needing us badly enough is enough on its own. You're still the stranger they shouldn't trust. Some of them decide to anyway.